Hi, I'm John Townsend, and I've got Kevin Carter with me today, and we're going to be doing a chestnut pudding. Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking with James Townsend and Son. So we got some chestnuts here for this pudding.
Right. Yeah, Dolores walked in the other day with a big bag of chestnuts, and these chestnuts actually came in their husks, their burrs, which I found really unusual. And I got to asking about it. These are American chestnuts.
I didn't know there were any around at all.
No, I'd heard of like little pockets in Michigan and out in California, but this tree that's producing fruit is in this area. So I'm really excited. I found a recipe in the English Art of Cookery from 1788 by Richard Briggs.
Right. Tell me about the difference between what you're going to find in the grocery store and what we've got here.
Most of in fact, all of the chestnuts that we see in the grocery store are the Asiatic chestnuts. There are three main species of chestnuts. There's the European chestnut, or the sweet chestnut, the Asiatic, and the American.
Right. And the Americans were attacked by a blight in the early 20th century, right? So basically for the last 100 years, we haven't really had any good chestnuts.
Right.
But what about historically chestnut trees, though?
Well, I read one account where it's estimated that in Appalachia, 1 out of 4 hardwoods was a chestnut tree.
Wow.
So we need to prepare these first by boiling them. You know, you can score these husks. I've found that using a masher is perfect. Just give it a good smash. And what that does is it allows the water to penetrate the husk to soften up the meat inside.
And so now I can set this on to boil, and it will actually cook these meats up.
Right, about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, John, we're gonna half this recipe.
Okay.
I think there was enough in this recipe to make 2 pies. So the recipe called for 2 dozen chestnuts, and if you half that, of course, that's 12. We're using about 2 dozen chestnuts because they're smaller. This pudding is actually going to look like a pie when it's done, almost like
they'd said a pumpkin pudding when we would call it a pumpkin pie.
Right. And so now we need to add all the other ingredients together while those chestnuts are boiling.
Okay.
So I've got 3 eggs, 3 whole eggs, and 3 egg yolks. You know, it called for having the recipe a half a pound of, or a quarter of a pound, or a whole stick of butter.
Right.
I found that to be way too much. I've cut that back to about 5 or 6 tablespoons, and you could probably cut that back even more. And then we have a half cup of sugar, a pinch of salt,
and then the nutmeg, nutmeg's in everything.
Right, yeah. And about, what is there, a half a teaspoon there?
Yeah.
And you could even cut back on that a little bit because it doesn't take much
powerful.
nutmeg for that to take over everything.
Right.
And then it called for having the recipe 1.5 pints of cream, and I found that to be a lot too. So we're just going to go with a pint of cream on this.
Okay, these are done boiling. Let's shell these, I guess.
Yeah. There's an outer husk,
right,
and then there is like a skin on the fruit itself.
Sometimes the skin stays with the shell, and sometimes it stays stuck to it. And you want it to be that nice kind of amber color. If it's not that amber color, either it's still got the skin on it, or it's a bad nut, and you want to get rid of it. So now we have to, obviously we don't use them whole. We have to turn them into a paste, right?
Right. And I'll tell you, John, if you're in to this recipe for the historical experience, here you go. This is it.
You get to mash them in that. So do you dice them up first and then?
That might help, yeah. But I'll tell you, if you're into this recipe for the finished product, this is going to rob you of your joy.
Okay.
So
you're going to use a modern method.
Right. I'd highly recommend a food processor.
Okay.
You might be able to get away with a blender if you keep stirring it up, but it's a tremendous amount of work to make a paste out of this with a mortar and pestle. So the recipe says to take the fruits, the nuts here, and you pulverize it with a little bit of orange water or rose water, and we're going to skip that as well. We're deviating from the recipe. But also sack, a little bit of sack.
So we can use some sack.
And you're going to need that to make it a
get
form
some
of
moisture
paste.
in it, right?
Right. So I'm going to take this, go into the other kitchen, blend it up in a food processor, and I'll bring it back.
Okay, good.
All right, here it is, John.
Okay.
I hope our viewers indulge us on that part. That is a tremendous amount of work.
Okay.
But,
and so we just mix this into our standard batter mix, right? Or what we mixed up earlier. Okay, so are we trying to get this super smooth or a little bit of lumpy is okay?
It's going to be a little lumpy, and that's fine. Now what we need to do is we need to put this over a fire and stir it so that it thickens.
Well, this is obviously thickened up, and it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it looks the consistency of a loose oatmeal.
It looks like some of the lumps have even kind of come out a little bit. Or maybe they've just thickened up around them. I don't know.
You know, you stirred that the whole time.
Right.
It was over the flame, and as soon as it started boiling, that's when it thickened up.
Changes its consistency.
The recipe says we let this cool down a little bit.
Or else it might mess up the paste. Okay.
Right. Okay, we've put this in a pastry crust. You could use puff paste as well. The recipe called for puff paste.
Right.
And this is ready to go.
Okay, so how long are we going to bake this?
About an hour in an oven that's been preheated to 375 degrees.
Okay, so I'll get this in the oven.
All right. There it is. Wow.
A beautiful chestnut pudding.
Now we've let this cool down completely. When we took it out of the oven, it was a little jiggly. But if you notice, it's just slightly browned on top.
Right. That's where it's at, right?
Yep.
Okay.
We're ready to go.
It's gorgeous. So, let's
see
what it cuts up like.
Okay.
Well, I guess now we're going to find out whether it really turned out.
All right.
Definitely a flavor you're not used to. It's very, very good.
I get the nutmeg hits you right up front, and then it kind of fades out. You taste the sweetness, almost like a sugar cream pie.
Right.
And then there's a nuttiness at the end.
Right. And it's not perfectly smooth. Those little nut pieces are in there, so you have a little bit of texture, a little bit of tooth to it. I think it's excellent. Thank you, Kevin, for digging this one up. This one's wonderful. It's really pretty easy to do. It's got some great little ingredients, and it makes a wonderful, we would call it a pie. They call it a pudding. It's very great. I hope you get a chance to try out one of these pies, and I want to thank you for watching. If you're new to our channel, I want to welcome you. You can subscribe by clicking the button right up here. Also, check out our related videos. Thanks so much for watching.